Yep. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor John Ward, Acting Leader of Babergh District Council, and I'll be chairing this meeting. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use, that you do not interrupt other speakers, that if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Additionally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded, and if you are intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. I'd now like to move to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Dave Busby.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interest by members. Are there any interest to declare members? No. Thank you. Item 3, paper BCA 2347 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of March 2024. So we'll go through these, starting at page 5 on the agenda pack, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, and that's it. So if members have no comments or matters arising from the minutes, then may I have a proposal for the minutes, please? Councillor Derek Davis and a seconder, Councillor Helen Davis. Right, we'll now go to the vote for the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for and 2 abstentions. That's carried.
Thank you. Item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
Thank you, Chair. We have received the following validated petition. We have 7,825 validated signatures regarding Council car parking charges. The petition has been debated at full Council in accordance with the Council's petition procedure rules.
Thank you. Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. Members, are there any comments on the forthcoming decisions list? No? Right, okay, moving on then. I'm now going to move item 9, the paper BCA 2349, Procurement of Repairs Management and Scheduling System, up the agenda to be considered first. And this is with the agreement of the Cabinet Member for Housing. So item 9 then is the procurement of the repairs management system. Oh, sorry, Councillor Derek Davis, you've got a question. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I do have a question. I'm more than happy and understand the reasons for moving it on the agenda, but could I suggest if we do need to go into confidential, which is obviously there as well, exclude the press and public, can we then defer that to the end of the meeting and rather than keep everybody waiting?
That's not going to be possible, I'm afraid, because we need to take a vote. We need to come back out and take a vote to close this item down. I'll come on to that when in a short while, but I understand your concern about that, but I don't think that's going to be feasible, to be honest. Okay, so so paper BCA 2349. We have in attendance Deborah Fenton, Director of Housing, on via the hybrid link, and also David White, the Housing Transformation Manager, here. Now, as Councillor Davis has pointed out, this report does contain confidential appendices. If members do wish to ask questions on the appendices, we will have to go into closed session, but I hope that there aren't too many questions on that, but we will have to do that. I know it's a bit clunky, but we'll have to go in, ask the questions, get the answers, and then come out again, and then continue with the debate and then the vote. That's the process, unfortunately. So we'll have to do that if necessary. So I'll now like to invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce this report. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Today's proposal is for approval from Cabinet is for the replacement of the Total Mobile Connect job management IT system to our current system. This is intended to provide essential support for the Building Services Department's transformation projects and strategic goals. It has been known to us for far too long that our current IT system is not fit for purpose, resulting in tenants being uninformed about the progress of their repairs, with some waiting months or even years for updates on scheduled works. To address this issue and enhance our services, the new proposed system is crucial. Our main priorities are improving customer satisfaction, making it easy to book appointments, ensuring that customers' needs are met, increasing the success rate of fixing issues on the first try, and reducing the need for additional communication to follow up on repairs. These objectives are specified in a detailed document as part of a request for the proposal process. Although brief, the report in your agenda is crucial in highlighting the significance of this system and how it has the potential to revolutionise our approach to repairs and communication with tenants. The financial costs are outlined for you in Table 6 of your agenda, though as stated in 6.1, these costs are budgeted for as part of our HRA capital spend. This proposed system will dramatically alter how repairs are handled and will greatly enhance the relationship and communication with our tenants. By providing detailed information on job logs, timelines, and by delegating tasks efficiently, we can ensure that works are completely transparently and as quickly as possible. With accessible timeframes for everyone involved, residents, councillors, and council staff alike will have a clear understanding of when repairs are scheduled and who is responsible for them. This system is a necessity and a vital step towards improving the overall maintenance operations of our council houses. I would like to thank officers who have worked towards finding us the best solution to a problem we have faced with our current IT system. And therefore, I would like to propose the recommendation that Cabinet approve the appointment of Total Mobile Limited to provide and execute their comprehensive job management system for the purpose of aiding Babergh in achieving its transformation and strategic goals in the realm of building services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Potter. Okay, members of the Cabinet, do you have any questions? Right, firstly Councillor Derek Davis, then Councillor Helen Davis. Okay, Helen, first.
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Jessie, for the report. I'd like to make a general comment and then a question. When we first saw the state of the housing area, it didn't look great, but people have obviously worked really hard to turn this around, and I think we're seeing the impact of those efforts now. So I think thanks go to the housing team for all their hard work, and we hope for the continued success. The question is around post-implementation review. Once you've put the systems in, are you doing post-implementation reviews at regular intervals so that you can address any issues that are coming out and highlight areas of concern?
Yes, it will be continuously looked at, and this is I'd say it's our number one priority to make sure that houses are brought up to standard, so it will be part of it.
Yeah, I was actually talking about the systems as well, because the systems are crucial. if they're not functioning fluidly and your processes surrounding it aren't optimised, then that will impact the level of service that you will be giving to your clients.
Yes, well, that will be looked at along the way.
Yeah, two questions really, and apologies, I've looked through the papers, but I may have missed it. What are we benchmarking total mobility against, and what other district councils or councils have they already implemented this system at?
I am not sure. I will. Would you be able to answer? Thank you very much.
So Total Mobile is kind of one of the sector leading providers of this type of technology. I'm not sure off the top of my head what other local authorities have they've worked with or implemented it in, but a number of the sort of housing association sector they've definitely successfully implemented and realised benefits through that piece of technology. Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Chair. I note in the next steps element of the report that it says we'll need to identify suitable personnel to support the project. Can I ask, do we believe we have those personnel currently employed by the council, or are we seeking to employ new staff either on a permanent or interim basis?
I believe that it is being looked at to see whoever is best fitted for the job, whether that is someone that we already have or someone that we will have to outsource. I don't know if you have any clarification.
Yeah, so to ensure a successful implementation of the project, we have hired in some external skills that are required. Those skills will be part of what the new hires are doing. Will be transferring some of those skills to our existing staff. The system itself will be maintained by the systems team that sits under my service area, and obviously the wider transformation and the staffing is being looked at as we speak anyway, to ensure that we are going to be set up. So it's not necessarily any new staff, no, not new staff required specifically for this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions, anyone? In which case, I'll ask, are there any questions from any other members of the council on this? Okay, well, it's over to the Cabinet for Cabinet debate then. Who would like to open the debate? Councillor Derek Davis.
I'll just make it really simple. I think this is a good step forward. Although the previous system worked well enough, it wasn't obviously good enough and up to scratch, and so we need to move with the towns, we need to offer with the times, and we need to offer our residents the best possible service going forward. So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yes, I tend to agree with that. I think I'll probably phrase it a bit stronger. The current system is not really fit for purpose at all. So it's absolutely essential that we have this. And looking at the spec of the Total Mobile solution, it does look as though it is going to do the job that we want, and for a reasonable price, which is already budgeted for in the HRA capital programme. So I think the procurement process that has been undertaken in terms of looking at the options has been excellent, and we're going to end up with a solution that will help us to move a long way forward on what we're trying to achieve with building services. Would anyone else like to say anything? Councillor Sally Davis.
Yeah, I mean, I think what some of us have found with systems like this is that it all looks as if it's working, and on paper or digitally it looks like it's working, but on the ground we get a different story. On the ground with the people in the houses, the tenants, they're telling us differently, and I think the proof of the effectiveness of this system has to be with the tenants, and we have to listen to them as well as do all the other post-implementation checks, because that will actually be the proof of the pudding.
Yes, fair point, yep. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm thoroughly in favour of the proposal here. It has a lot of benefits. One, of course, it's within budget. It's already accounted for. Two, I'm particularly pleased that I know that this, in terms of performance management, this integrates well with systems that we're bringing into use elsewhere. I'm looking for nods over there. I thought I'd get one. And finally, the risk management. In terms of the risk register, was checked through this, and the risks are they're within the acceptable end of the range for risk management. Again, that's a system where we're trying to integrate across the council for performance and risk management as a whole, and that's something I take a particular interest in, so I'll be happy to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, I'll make this very short and sweet, Chair. Just welcoming all the proposals and technology involved with this. Hopefully we'll see short repair times, timescales narrowed. That's the hope that we can bring here, and I fully support this.
Thank you. Any further comments? And does anyone want to ask any questions on the confidential paper, just to close this off? I think it's all fairly clear. It's just talking about the procurement process itself. So I'm quite happy that we don't have to go into confidential session. Right. If there are no further comments, then we'll move to the vote on this one.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Right, I'm now going to move on to item 8, paper BCA 2348, car parking charges and road traffic orders. And we have in attendance today Mark Ems, Director of Operations, Matt Smith, Parking Services Manager, Jack Burton, our Finance Business Partner, and Catherine Davis, Sustainable Travel Officer. And I'll now introduce the report as Acting Leader of the Council. So I will now introduce report BCA 2348, car parking charges and road traffic orders. Firstly, as I said in January, I do want to acknowledge that this is a very emotive and divisive subject, probably the most divisive we have ever had, as evidenced by the anger and misunderstandings that have accompanied the debate in various public forums. I really hope that the case and the facts presented in this report are considered by all parties rather than being dismissed out of hand. Babergh, like many other councils, has a well-publicised forecast budget shortfall over the next few years, and that's summarised in paragraph 1.8, with the huge cost of our car parks being a not inconsiderable part of this. We cannot continue to carry this cost if we want to deliver essential and valued services for our residents and communities, and of course to fund the investment recommended in our car parking strategy so that the parking service we provide meets the needs of residents, businesses and visitors alike in the years ahead. We really only have 3 options. Outsource the car parks to a commercial operator, which we've already ruled out, get the towns to take over the car parks, which they do not want to do, or introduce the modest revisions to the tariffs proposed in this report. It must be realised that a contributory factor to our current financial woes has been our failure to tackle the matter of parking charges for many years. We can no longer shy away from making difficult decisions. I would at this point like to stress 2 things that seem to get forgotten or overlooked as the debate has played out in recent months. Firstly, we're only talking about implementing short-term charges in our car parks that don't already have them. Long-term charges for stays longer than 3 hours have always existed. Secondly, this really shouldn't be a party political issue, and looking around the country, it isn't. Nearly all councils of all political colours charge for parking, with very few having any form of so-called free parking. I talked to many council leaders, and I just discussed this again with them at the recent District Council Network Conference. All, irrespective of party, don't understand what all the fuss is about. They are incredulous that we still have a 3-hour period where we don't charge and don't understand why we have damaged our finances by continuing with this. It's no wonder we're struggling and can't yet afford to carry out the priorities in our plan for Babergh. We have before us a paper that has resulted in a huge amount of research and modelling that includes moderate, considered recommendations. Section 2 of the report discusses options that have been looked at and rejected, and I would like to draw everyone's attention particularly to paragraph 2.5, which addresses some of the challenges of running the car parks within a CIC, which I know has generated much discussion, and also paragraph 2.6, which explains why even a minimal free period is not recommended. I'm sure we'll return to these two topics later. On the 9th of January, Cabinet asked the officers to carry out district-wide consultation and make recommendations on varying car parking charges. The feedback was considered and incorporated into the modelling and also this report. A summary of the consultation activity is provided in section 9 with the full report attached in Appendix D. We received 88 responses and the sources of these is shown in paragraph 9.4. As expected, most respondents were concerned about potential problems with the new tariffs may cause. The two most cited were a possible impact on businesses and an increased pressure on on-street parking. We are mitigating these by ensuring that the tariffs are set at a level that won't discourage car park use. The majority of respondents were concerned about the lack of public transport alternatives, but many were sceptical that there would ever be an improvement in bus services or that additional sustainable travel options would tempt people to use them. I would like to thank all who responded and provided us with their views. We did get some constructive and practical suggestions, and we will debate some of these later. This paper has already been examined by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, as agreed at our Cabinet meeting in January, and they made a number of recommendations to Cabinet, which can be seen in the minutes provided in Appendix H. I would like to thank the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for a thorough examination of the report and for their recommendations for Cabinet to consider. We will address these later. Looking at the tariff proposals themselves, firstly, I am pleased that we have included recommendation 3.6 to ensure that the leisure centre users are refunded. I know this has been a particular concern to the Mayor of Sudbury, and I know that she'll be pleased that we have listened to her representations. I note that in a letter we have all received, a member of Hadley Town Council has complained that we are not considering refunds for the Hadley Health Centre users. This is not correct. Recommendation 3.7 does address this. Paragraph 6.7 contains two tariff options, and both of these have very modest short-term charges which have been benchmarked against neighbouring towns in Suffolk and North Essex. We have also reviewed the proposals against the ethos advice provided to us to inform the parking strategy we approved in 2022. The principle of a single universal district-wide tariff with the same pricing in place based on car park designation as opposed to location is being proposed with the exception of Pin Mill. This will be equitable to all areas and would be easier for users to understand. We are proposing to increase the maximum short stay period to 4 hours and to reduce the all-day rate in long-stay car parks from £3 to £2.50. Blue badge holders will still be able to park in designated bays for free for 3 hours. We are proposing to increase and standardise the charging period to Monday to Saturday, 8 AM to 6 PM. Sunday and bank holiday parking will remain free. Pin Mill will retain its current Monday to Sunday charges. We're proposing small increases in the price of season tickets, and the new rates are shown in paragraph 6.24. Season tickets are currently available in the car parks listed in paragraph 6.23, and we are proposing to add those listed in paragraph 6.27. We're proposing to change the short and long stay designation of some car parks to be consistent and to encourage better usage. The full list of car parks, designation and available spaces is provided in paragraph 6.22. Now I want to address the cost and income forecasts that are presented in paragraphs 6.28 to 640 and also Appendix C. Again, I know these have caused some controversy, not least because of how we make a full cost assessment for the parking service. The explanation of how this assessment is made is provided in paragraphs 6.28 to 6.30. I know that the inclusion of corporate overhead recharges is not liked by some, but how else can we account for overheads? Not doing anything wouldn't leave us as we are now. There will be increasing budget pressures as costs rise, and the forecast individual and cumulative impacts of this are shown for the next year and the year after in the last two rows in the third and fourth columns of the table in Appendix C. A cumulative additional budget pressure of £125,000 by 2026 to 27. This would have to be met from reserves. Reserves we are fast depleting. Conversely, you'll see that the forecast benefits of the budget in the bottom rows for each of the tariff options. For option A, these start at just under £400,000 for the current year, rising to nearly £750,000 next year, with the cumulative benefit being £1.8 million by 2026 to 27. I do want to stress that this is a positive benefit to the budget, not the forecast profit from the car parks, which you'll see from the rows immediately above will still run at a loss, but at a much reduced subsidy. Now, I am aware that there have been accusations of double taxation, that we already charge for parking through council tax. This fundamentally misunderstands what council tax can do. At just under 25% of our total funding and income sources, council tax cannot, and is not expected to cover all the services we provide, certainly not the discretionary ones like car parking. Other discretionary services that are delivered for individual use carry a charge. Garden waste collection is the most obvious example of this. A Hadley Town Council has also written to the Cabinet to say that we should just increase council tax to fund the car parks and that residents would prefer this. Some Hadley residents might prefer it, but probably not all. And what about the residents in, say, Shotley, Holbrook, Grantham, for example? He incorrectly has said that we aren't yet increasing council tax to the limit allowed. Unfortunately, we are. Only counties and unitaries can add another 2%, but that is a ring-fenced adult social care precept. We would have to hold a referendum to get agreement for a council tax increase above the 2.99% limit, and I can't see that being approved. I certainly wouldn't want to propose it. The increase for all residents would be a lot more than another 2%, so the council tax option is clearly a non-starter. Now, we probably will be debating, I know we will be debating some possible changes to the recommendations and tariffs. But firstly, I want to address the very detailed and persuasive letter that Cabinet has received from Lavenham Parish Council. On behalf of us all, I would like to thank Lavenham for their positive engagement with us. They have made several suggestions that we have discussed and would be willing to investigate, and we will debate these later. Also, from the consultation and other representations, I know that many residents are concerned about those who need to park for just a short while to pick up prescriptions from a pharmacy, for example. And this has caused much concern, I know, in Hadley, as has the use of a car park in that town for the school run, which was also part of a recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We'll also debate these later. Section 11 of the report goes into greater detail about some of the environmental benefits and describes a number of sustainable transport options that we would be in a much better position to consider if we have stronger finances. Finally, I'd like to thank Mark Ems, Matt Smith and Jack Burton for the huge amount of work they've put into this. They must be congratulated for the detail they have provided to both Cabinet and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and their support and patience is really appreciated. So I'd like to propose the recommendations in section 3 of this report and ask for a seconder. May I have a seconder? Councillor Derek Davis. Thank you. Okay. We will now move to questions from members. Monitor Officer, did you want to say anything at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to speak to members of Cabinet and to other councillors who are present. I was tasked by the Overview and Scrutiny to investigate whether some members of the Cabinet may have predetermined themselves. So as part of that investigation, I have looked into it, and the principle of charging for car parking was actually introduced in the parking strategy, which was approved by Cabinet back in February 21, and is therefore already agreed. So predetermination would not apply in this case. But with regards to the actual recommendations related to the tariffs that are proposed in the report, predisposition is lawful. Members may have strong views on a proposed decision and may have expressed those views in public and still participate in a decision. This will include political views and manifesto commitments. The key issue is that the member ensures that their predisposition does not prevent them from consideration of all the other factors that are relevant to a decision, such as the report, supporting documents, recommendations from ONS and the views of objectors. In other words, the members must retain an open mind. Section 25 of the Localism Act 2011 confirms this position by providing that a decision will not be unlawful because of an allegation of bias or predetermination just because a member has done anything that would indicate what view they may take in relation to a matter relevant to that decision. I would, however, ask members of the Cabinet today, though, that if they think their mind is so close to the argument regarding the proposed tariffs and the recommendations in the report, that they declare this now and leave the room and do not take part in the debate. The other investigation that I was asked to do, concerns were raised about the petitions process followed for council. I am satisfied that the correct process was followed. The petitions process is prescribed in the Constitution. On this occasion, the Chair used her discretion to extend the time for debate and to allow all councillors to speak. A motion without notice was tabled and seconded to note the petition. This was one of the options that were available to council. Once a motion without notice is tabled and seconded, then the Chair must deal with that immediately. On this occasion, the Chair used her discretion again to defer this to allow the remaining councillors who wished to speak to do so before putting that motion to the vote. This motion was then approved by council. Ultimately, the end result is that the petition has also followed the route of being referred to other bodies, two of the other options that were available to council on that night. The report and the petition were considered by overview and scrutiny, and the petition will be taken into account by Cabinet when considering the options before them today, where they must pay due regard to the strength of public feeling in that petition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, excuse me. Members of the Cabinet, we'll first start with questions, but please can we just focus on questions? I know everyone's really itching to get into the debate, but there'll be plenty of time for that to come. So if there are any questions on the content of the report or anything relating to that, then please ask those. Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's been many questions, as you can probably imagine, but one that's been itching away at me and that keeps getting asked of me is why not allow CICs to take over the particular car parks which they want to? Could someone explain the reason behind that, or not that?
I will start off, but I know that Councillor Saul wants to come in on this, and I'm sure Mark Ames will be able to provide some background information. But clearly, one of the key factors in this is getting somebody to run the CIC, and as yet, there doesn't appear to be any appetite amongst anyone for doing so. In terms of some of the more detail about CIC, Councillor Saul, did you want to say, I know you wanted to say a few words on this, because you've done some investigation, haven't you?
Thank you, Chair. Could I say at the outset that temperamentally, I am in favour of community interest companies and all forms of social and employee ownership. So I looked to see whether there were any other organisations running car parks. I've also spoken with the community interest company regulator who sits in Companies House. So there are some small areas where there are CICs, for example, Bowcastle in Cornwall, and some car parks that are run by, situated in parks. They all charge. Why do they charge? Because just like ourselves, they have to maintain the car park. As Councillor Ward says, you need an organisation to run the CIC. You also need to generate, as I said, enough income to run and maintain the car parks. There is also another issue about tax relief. We in Babergh might very well give business rates relief to a CIC, but we then would have to talk to county and central government for them to give business tax relief. At this stage, of course, it's not clear whether they would do so. Although I would think that this was a very good solution, there are some obstacles to it. And I'm sure the Director of Operations could enlarge on this.
Mark, are there any further points on this that you could add?
Not too much more to add, Chair, really. 2.5 covers what our findings were when this question was raised during the engagement process, and we consulted with the head of our service that looks after business rates to get their opinion, and that's included in 2.5. And yeah, and as we've stated, we don't think that a CIC, which is predicated on the avoidance of business rates, to be the main benefit of setting up a CIC is the right way to go, and poses significant risk as to whether that could be achieved. I mean, the advice was that it can't, and then it could be subject to challenge. And yes, I agree with Councillor Saw that there is the other overheads that need to be covered, delivering car parking in the future, and everything else that goes with it that we've set out in this report as part of our full cost recovery.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Can I just comment on that and say that I've spoken to the Sudbury Chamber of Commerce, and they have said that they would be interested in looking at the CIC as was looked at in 2011. I don't know how they were reached out to, but just a few conversations that I've had them, they would be interested. And within the consultation, I don't believe that towns and parishes were given the option to look at that. It was just a case of we are looking at putting up charges. How do you feel about that? So I would have liked to have seen it looked at more, considering they are willing.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. I've got Councillor McCraw and then Councillor Sally Davis. Is this on this particular subject? Yes, okay. Councillor McCraw.
On the subject of CICs, since I have one in my ward, so basic understanding I have of such organisations is that their purpose is to provide service within the community. They're not in business to make a profit. Any profit they do make is reinvested in the function that they are, the job they're doing, in their terms of reference, if you like. So in this case, it would be parking. And, you know, it occurs to me, an organisation that isn't required to make a profit, in other words, just break even, but if it does have a profit, reinvesting into that sector is a pretty good description of a council. We're not here to make a profit. We are here to provide services, and any surplus that we should generate goes back into our general budget to support the rest of our services. It seems to me that the CIC route is a bit of a sort of duplication of a function we already carry out. Just a thought.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sally Davis.
Yeah, I just wanted a bit of clarification. So were the towns and chambers approached or not with the idea of a CIC? Because Councillor Carter suggests that they weren't. Can I just check that?
Mark, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, the answer is they weren't directly approached, because the issue of a CIC was raised to us from the Sudbury Chamber. We looked into the issue of a CIC. We don't believe a CIC is possible or would work, so we haven't engaged throughout the district on CICs. The other issue as well, you've got to split the enforcement up, so these would affect, under a CIC, would become private car parks. There's the assets and how they'd need to be treated and dealt with as well. We don't believe a CIC is possible, so we haven't looked at it. We've provided the reasons why not.
Thank you. Councillor Carter and then Councillor McCraw.
I think that if they believe that it is possible, and if it is something that they are willing to look into, as they have already done years ago, I think that discussion should have been had with them, and with the towns and parishes that would have had to have joined up with them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCraw?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned here that, I mean, the opportunity to raise this did come out in the engagement process, but didn't turn up until after the engagement process. The other thing is about setting up such a CIC is, it seems to me that it would take some time. We also have to get the agreement of Suffolk County Council and central government to do what? To construct an organisation which is going to duplicate what we're already doing. And, I mean, it's not as though we can do a direct transfer. As I understand it, there's a lot more to it than that in the CIC. I think Deborah would be able to comment upon that. The point I'm making is, We have an existing structure, car parking organisation. Any CIC would be required to create their own. And I suspect that's just, I'm not sure what's the point, because we're replacing something that already exists for the same purpose. It's, I think, generally accepted that CICs would have to charge for parking, so no free parking would be possible. So again, I'm not sure I see the point in replacing an already existing organisation which we know can be made to work, as referred to in the report.
Yeah, I can't see that they would be able to charge any less than we're proposing and the tariffs we've got here. So I struggle to see the benefit. But, I've got Councillor Derek Davis and then Councillor Carter again.
I'm going to go back to questions, if that's okay, rather than debate. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I know. We're kind of debating an answer to a question, but...
I'm grateful to Councillor Sora and Mark Hems for the explanation, and hopefully the members of the public will have a greater understanding, but I'd also pick up Councillor Carter's point. My question is, it was mentioned in your speech earlier on, your introduction, about either short-term parking and also permits or rebates. My preference, and I wonder how this has been explored, is to look at AMPR. And I use that, and I say that because in Chelmerdiston we've recently seen a business introduce AMPR because they were having parking problems, and after the initial understandable upset, it settled down really well, it works really well, it's really simple in my opinion, but I wonder, the question obviously is to Mark Ems, how much of has that been looked at, the use of AMPR? Sorry, just to clarify, for and the medical centres in Hadley, Sudbury and Lavenham.
Thank you. We are going to look at using technology for those problems as a solution. We already have a virtual parking provider, My Permit, that people use on a regular basis, and though they have their own system of checking in on a tablet when you get to a car park and saying, I'm here for this purpose. AMPR would not necessarily know that someone has gone there and has parked to go to the health centre. They could be going somewhere else.
Sorry, just to clarify, so they would go to the health centre and then just as they're checking in to register as they would do in at reception, they put in their number plate and therefore they would be given a digital permit, which obviously is a lot less than having to do a refund of money. That's my thought.
Yeah, that's correct.
Haven't seen that experience yet.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, did you want to say anything? I guess you want to go back on the CIC message.
Just one last point.
Yeah, certainly. Go ahead. Yeah.
So you mentioned that they wouldn't be looking at giving any time free. You mentioned that you didn't know what their tariffs would be, but how could they possibly have come up with any of that without the engagement from us? We're just hypothesising what it is that they may or may not do. But I think that it seriously needs to be looked into because I believe it is a viable option.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll come back to this in the debate. We've explored the question. We'll return to it later. Councillor Saul, did you have a question as well?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I don't know if many colleagues had seen the recent article in the Times about the use of technology in council car parks, and they featured the situation in Harrogate. Now, I know that's a bigger place and has a great deal of tourism traffic and business conference traffic, but they had instituted demand pricing. I just wondered what the Director of Operations' view, or his colleagues' view was on demand pricing. I'm sorry if that's I looked at it and I thought I could see some pluses, but I could also see some minuses. But I would be interested in your view.
Yes, happy to give my views, Councillor. I think we're probably some distance away from looking at demand-led pricing and that using that sort of technology or matrix signs to indicate pricing as you drive into one of our towns. But potentially we can see the direction this is going in the future, where there's different companies and attractions around the country are now offering demand-led pricing, and you can certainly see where if it was tourist led, then potentially that can have some benefits. But what we tried to design in our proposal is trying to benefit workers and visitors to town with long stay and reducing that price. So I'm not sure we're on the page of increasing prices when or trying to profit at that time and take the risk then of reducing the prices to lower. And one of the issues as well is we need to understand the data better as we go forward, and if this proposal is accepted, then we'll get a much better understanding of our 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour stays than what we have at the moment as well. So it might be possible in the future.
Thank you. And given that a few of us will be attending the Local Government Association conference, which this year is in Harrogate, we'll be able to observe for ourselves. Councillor Sally Davis.
I think there's a certain amount of disappointment that there's no free parking at all in the plans, and there are some broad costings in the report that say that that basically we wouldn't be able to save anywhere near as much if we allowed any element of free parking. Could I have just a little bit more detail on the implications of giving, because we haven't got a tariff set out in detail, and I presume that's because, broadly speaking, it wasn't worth doing that because it was obvious we would lose too much money. Could I just have a little bit more detail of the implications of allowing some element of free parking?
Yeah, I think, Jack, you've probably got some of the numbers there, but essentially, as in the report, it does refer to somewhere between £200,000 and £260,000 being the amount that we would lose should we give a free 1 hour period. So that would have a cumulative impact, a significant cumulative impact over the next few years. Jack, did you, as the person who put together the numbers, do you want to give any further background on this? Or Mark?
Yeah. Sorry, I'll start, Chair, and Jack can jump in if he wants. Okay. It was something that was questioned, obviously, by overview and scrutiny, and we did have a look at what that impact would be. It wasn't coming up with free tariff options wasn't something that we were initially tasked with keeping car parking free from the 9th of Jan, but we have a model and we have looked at it. The up to 1 hour would be a drop of around about £150,000 worth of income, and then we looked at two scenarios on the up to 2 hours, a 10% or 20% migration of users from that 2 hour tariff over to what would be a 1 hour free tariff, and that's where we came to an estimate of around about 260,000. That's up to 260,000. That's in the report. The thinking was then, if you're doing that, then you're taking away the ability to be able to invest in improving the car parks under the parking strategy, or to be able to make sustainable travel investments that would included from the repayments of both of those from year 3, and you're just continuing to increase the level of subsidy on the car parking. Practically, free car parking makes it more difficult to enforce and makes the enforcement operation less effective as people are moving around free car parking. And then there's the level of how long you'd want the free car parking for. Otherwise, you're just basically encouraging people to dash into town and dash out of town on a shorter trip as well. So for all of those reasons, we discussed and we haven't sort of brought it forward here. And further to that, it would encourage, if they're shorter trips, then people are more likely to make more trips, which would require more consumption of petrol. So in actual fact, for the individuals concerned, it would probably end up more expensive for them. But obviously, that's a personal choice. Are there any other questions? I've got Councillor Carter, Councillor Potter, and then Councillor Derek Davis, and then Councillor Saul.
Thank you. It's acknowledged in the report that residential streets may be negatively affected by the parking charges. There is a list, 11.3, it says that there are some potential projects that could be developed with the money that comes in, possibly. As we don't have any money from county's cuts earlier this year, county don't have any money. Is it safe to say that we can actually look at this? We'd financially be able to do so, and if we are financially able to do so, why can't we use the money for that to continue to subsidise the parking? Thank you.
Mark?
I suppose what I'd start off with is we certainly can't do anything to fix that problem at the moment because we just don't have the money. So the problem will continue to get worse as it stands, and it is an existing problem across the 3 areas really covered in the report. We haven't said that we can't use that. We can't use some of the money being generated for those reviews. We're looking to bring a resource in that will help to, if this is agreed, to help to deliver these changes, but also we've got that resource in our costing going forward to carry out these reviews, and some work can be done there. We're being absolutely upfront. If we're having to make physical on-street changes and we can get the survey results that support that for residents' parking zones or changes, and the county council to buy into that, we know the position with the county council's funds, and it's unlikely they're going to come forward with those funds. But that's not to say that we can't generate some funding for that within this proposal, and would certainly be in a lot better position than we are at the moment, where we can't generate funding for that purpose to improve the nuisance parking issues, to improve the issues that we've got, to improve the quality of our car parks, or to move it forward.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yep, thanks, Chair. We looked at all these particular car parks, tariffs and so on, but I understand that the Key Theatre in Sudbury is a Babergh controlled car park. Can this be confirmed? And if so, why have we not looking at charging tariffs in this particular setting? Thank you.
Mark, do you have
there's a small number of Sudbury car parks which are actually sort of a bit further out from the main car parks, which are already charged, and we've not proposed adding charges into those car parks. We want to make sure that there's an element of free car parking available as well, both on street and at other locations in the locations. It wouldn't make sense to have all of the car parking charged, and we didn't look to bring that car park in for that reason.
Thank you. Councillor Derek Davis.
Thank you. It's along the sort of similar theme on off-street parking, on-street parking, sorry. So one of the big concerns has already been mentioned is the fact that there's no free parking. So therefore, those people that just want to literally nip in somewhere and then get something and then come back out are going to be slightly disadvantaged if they have to pay £1 or whatever it is. In Hadley High Street, for example, it's an hour free parking. Has it been considered, and I appreciate the parking strategy has looked at this, and we have very good parking according to the strategy throughout the district. Has it been looked at, for example, where that hour would be reduced to, say, half an hour or even quarter of an hour, just to allow that there would be a greater churn of traffic coming in and out of those particular car parking spaces on the high street, allowing people just to nip in and nip out as has been requested? And I appreciate that doesn't help the longer term. They still would go to the car park for that.
I'd really say that we're aware of the on-street car parking in Hadley and the time available there, and in our engagement with the town council, they've made us aware of that as well, and the changes that were made to timings through the COVID period, and how actually it's functioning fairly well, the on-street parking there. I think what's being raised is quite sensible, and that's something that we could look at, and that's something, if this is approved and goes forward and we have the resources, we would do detailed work in these towns to look at that. I think if you look in Sudbury, a lot of the enforcement work at the moment is our civil parking enforcement officers are telling us that they're following the same cars from car park to car park, which is free at the moment. So they're skipping charges, moving from one to another. And if you've got a tariff regime in place where that doesn't have to happen, then you've got more time available for on-street enforcement, which helps to turn over those spaces and make those spaces available directly outside some of the places where people want to visit. So that should be a positive action, hopefully.
Thank you. Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to explore the issue of using some of the proposed parking revenue to fund public transport options. Quite correctly in the report, you say that the amount of revenue we have to do that is limited, although our desire would be much greater to revive public transport in our district if we could. Could I ask realistically what the options could be? I note that, for example, in some of the communications we've had with Hadley Town councillors, they talk about shopper, low electric shopper buses, etc. But could you actually give us a bit more detail on that? Perhaps Catherine could.
Yeah, if I start, and then I'll give Catherine a few seconds, and I'll let Catherine provide a bit of information. Just to be really clear, we're not seeking to set out in our report that we're going to solve public transport issues by doing this. We cannot. We totally realise that, and that's in no way, shape or form are we trying to do that. But we have to accept the situation at the moment is there's nothing in the pot to put towards sustainable travel. So when funding becomes available from a government perspective, and we need to put in an amount of match funding, or we need to have the resource available to write the bids and to get on with doing that, we might not be in the best position to be able to do that or access that in the future. And under this proposal, we would be in a better position to do that. I can't say what it will be, but we'll be in a better position. And then we've outlined some options which would be achievable, and I'll let Catherine answer in a second. But just as an example, Catherine's given me, in mid-Suffolk, so far a spend of 60,500 has enabled us to install 7 bicycle maintenance repair stands in community spaces, set up and deliver a subsidised e-bike rental provision, make contributions to community transport provision, and the Quiet Lane Suffolk programme deliver 2 public engagement events, 6 primary school engagement events, focus on sustainable travel, and fund a residential comms campaign around local EV infrastructure. So some money is going to help with those sort of type level of things, but the actual bigger projects, trying to subsidise and enable services that move people around, we're unlikely to be able to afford to do them ourselves completely, but we can provide some grants and funding that might bring other providers to the table, where our additional bit of money makes the difference, and that's what we're hoping we'll be able to do, as well as some investments in sort of actual physical bits of infrastructure as well.
I think it's mostly been covered there, but just to add, if there was funding available that we could make contributions to the current community transport provision, as we have in the past. For example, we've given some match funding to Go Start to fund an electric minibus recently, and if we were able to offer more funding like that in the future, they could expand their provision and their low carbon fleet in order to, deliver things like a hopper bus, for example.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Sally Davis and Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask something about the consultation. When it has been represented as being an overwhelming response against the car parking charges, but I'm worried I'm missing something, because I read through the consultation, and one of the answers was that 48% of respondents were against the car parking charges, which seems to me that 52% either had no view or supported it. So, and as I read through the consultation, I couldn't make it match with the representation that there was an overwhelming response against the car parking charges. I wonder if somebody could throw some light on that for me.
I think that's a very good point. It is more nuanced than perhaps it would seem at face value. Mark, would you like to comment on that?
Yep, happy to answer that one. The engagement process was covered and managed by the strategic policy team, and their team looked after that. The results that came back in, they used thematics and they looked at mentions of certain themes in there. So the percentages, it wasn't a referendum 58%, 48%. It was 48% of the responses received a mention on that effectively as well. So that's why some of the percentages won't add up to full percentages, and that's why we haven't presented a set of graphs or pie charts to say in favour, against. We were kind of accepting the response coming back in was, you know, people, do you want car parking charges? Do you want an increase in your taxes? Do you want to pay twice as much for this? People aren't going to say we want that. It was about, when we put the context across, getting those responses back in, and we've not tried to portray in our report either way, particularly on that. We've just tried to address and pick up on the key themes that we've gone through and make sure that everything that was raised in terms of particular challenges, particular problems where there was evidence there, to present those problems, that we've tried to put mitigations to those problems in the report that we brought forward.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Thank you. I had two questions, but one of them was on the consultation, so I'll start with that, if that's okay. Reading through it, it wasn't very clear, as what has just been mentioned. And when I asked for the entire of Babergh to be included within the consultation, that was because we wanted to see what everybody's views were. But because it's in percentages and statistics, it doesn't actually say what villages were, what towns were, and what their opinions were, apart from the main three. So why was it presented in that way rather than in specifics?
I think we were fairly clear that that it wasn't going to be a referendum on would you like car parking charges, wouldn't you like car parking charges. We've left the strategic policy team to pull forward the report and bring the report forward. It's been independently written of us as a team sitting here. It's been carried out and written by the strategic policy team. I think there are constructive themes in there, constructive information in there that's been brought out that we've addressed in our report. So I think that's happened, but it was never a consultation to go out and do you want car parking, don't you want car parking charges. We were quite clear from that. It was an engagement process to go out and find out what we could so that we could address that in our proposals, to mitigate the issues.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Thank you. So the report references the budget gap that we're obviously looking to fill without having to use reserves as they dwindle. I think it's quite safe to say that it's partly due to the poor decisions from previous councils. But where in the report does it say that what the detrimental effect might be to not only to Babergh's economy but to our residents' health and well-being? Where is that within the report? Where has that been looked at?
To our residents' health and well-being,
Health and well-being and the detriment to the economy.
if we weren't to do this.
If we were.
If we were to do.
Yeah.
Oh, I see the point you're making. That kind of presupposes that there will be a detriment to the economy or the health and well-being of our residents. One could argue that, as I did mention in my introduction, we're looking at setting tariffs at a level that won't have an impact on businesses, and we can see that in other towns, not just locally but nationally, where tariffs are set at the kind of level that we're proposing here. Those towns are still thriving, so there's no reason why our towns and thrives still. So the impact on businesses, I think, is probably something that people are fearing rather than will actually happen in practice, given what we can see elsewhere. In terms of our residents' health and well-being, obviously that's a bigger question than just a matter of parking charges and travelling to towns to shop. But again, we're looking at levels that we don't think will discourage people from using our car parks or our towns, and people will still come in the same way that they always have done. So that's about all I can say to that. But those are two issues, and I do understand and I do sympathise with people's concerns there, because the last thing we want to do is for this to cause any wider harm. And this is why we're looking, as I said, at tariffs that we believe, from experience elsewhere, will not cause harm. But clearly there's something we would have to keep a very close watch on and respond to as quickly and effectively should we see any possible impact. Any other questions? Oh, Mark, did you want to? Sorry, I didn't see you up there.
Sorry, Chair. It's just to come in that Section 10 in the relevant appendix does contain the equality impact screening form assessment that we carried out. That's checked by the strategic policy team and signed off there as well, and that did seem to indicate that we wouldn't have to fill out a full equality impact assessment, but it does make reference to there in there in 10.2. You know, we are aware in our car parks of the need for people with physical mobility, disability, and some elderly users and other groups there in terms of navigating our car parks, and it's something we're aware of at the moment and we try and work hard on. But obviously if this proposal goes forward, then it's something that we can look to assess the quality of our car parks so they're even better in terms of being accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask a question about any proposed plan regarding, particularly in Hadley, regarding schools drop-off and pick-up. Obviously, we know that this is a problem in many towns and in many communities as regards blocking traffic, etc. In the more rural areas, parents have no choice but to drive their children to school. Some of those parents may well be finding the cost of living crisis that we're involved in very challenging. Have we thought of any way of mitigating any charges for those parents, particularly those parents whose children are in receipt of free school meals?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we have looked at that, and there is the possibility that we could introduce a school permit system which would enable people to use the car parks that they're using already for the use of the school run for just a short period of time at the morning, at the end of the day. And that is a scheme that we would run with any schools that require it.
Thank you.
We can come back to that in the debate, I think. It's certainly something we do need to explore. Councillor Carter.
I was just going to ask, sorry, I don't know if you want to go back to it in debate. I was just going to ask if you would charge for those and what the price would be.
That's not. We haven't actually looked at the. But you'd be talking if there was a fee, it would be an administrative fee. It wouldn't be a huge amount of money. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the Cabinet at this stage? If not, other members present, do you have questions? Right. Firstly, I'll go to Councillor McLaren, as Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, to ask a question, and then Councillor Grandon.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just
Darling after that.
Can I just make a couple of observations before I ask my question? And I have asked your permission, so I'm allowed to do it. I feel the public, the press, and even councillors were a bit confused as to why this came to overview and scrutiny and what would be scrutinised. So I just want to make that comment. I think people thought that we were going to scrutinise the proposal, which we weren't. We were looking at the process of engagement, but I think a lot of people were confused by that. The other thing is, when the decision was made to come to overview and scrutiny, I actually would have welcomed a discussion before it was put on the work plan. That came as a bit of a surprise to me. So that's just a comment. But my questions are on behalf of the Scrutiny Committee. Cabinet received our recommendations. I and all of us need to be reassured that they did consider seriously our recommendations, and I would be looking for a response to those recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. We will be providing a full response to members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But just in summary, I know you made 11 recommendations overall. 2 were for the monitoring officer, and we've just heard the monitoring officer's response on those recommendations 8 and 11. And so 9 were for Cabinet and officers to consider. 5 have been agreed in full, and they have been included within the report as amendments, and those are recommendations 1, 4, 5, 6 and 10. Recommendation 9 has been considered as requested and is touched upon in paragraph 920, but we just had a bit of a question and answer about the school run, and we will be returning to this in the debate later on. So that leaves 3 recommendations. Recommendation 2, that officers provide more detailed clarification on the amendments made to the information and proposals set out in the Cabinet report because of the consultation process. We do actually believe that that has been answered already in the report that went to overview and scrutiny, but if it wasn't clear which or where those amendments as a result of the consultation were or are in the report, we would be happy to provide examples and to demonstrate that. Recommendation 3, that officers be requested to set out in the report to Cabinet the proposed range of tariffs that include a free parking period of 1 hour and its associated costs. As you'll have heard so far, we have decided that it's not a good idea to accommodate that, not just for the reasons set out in paragraph 2.6 of the report, and there are further reasons in paragraph 911, but also you'll have heard the comments made so far on that one. And finally, recommendation 7, that officers include more information and context about the rural setting of the districts, the current reliance on car use to travel, and the accessible parking provisions needed to adequately meet this need. Now, obviously we accept that there is a heavy reliance on cars to travel. There always will be, because most people live in, or many people live in rural villages, many of us here today. But that's the case in all rural areas in the whole country, and this is an issue that is facing market towns wherever. We don't believe it's a sufficient justification for not charging for short-term parking, and we have reduced the all-day tariff so that we, in order to encourage longer stays and so that people do make a day of it to come into our towns. So that in summary, is the response to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's recommendations, and as I said, a full response will be provided to you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Grandin.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, you've just said in your reply to Councillor McLaren that it has been decided that the 1 hour will not be offered, the 1 hour that we mentioned in the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can you tell me why that is not a decision that is going to be debated in this meeting? That's my first matter I'd like to say. Second, I sent members of the Cabinet communications from Tendring District Council. In fact, this paper is a little inaccurate in its examination of neighbouring councils, because as you saw from the communication I sent to Cabinet members, Tendring District Council offers its residents free parking, I think it was after 9:30, in its car parks, so visitors pay, but its own residents, who effectively pay for that as one of their services, get free parking up to a certain period in their car parks as part for a permit for one car, and then they can pay a small amount for a second car if they wish per home. So if they can do that, why can't we? You were talking about businesses not suffering from imposing car parking charges. Do you think that places like Ipswich, Colchester, Haverhill, who is now thinking of, according to the press, thinking of giving free periods for parking to encourage people to use their businesses, do you not think that they're suffering? And Banbury, it's been in the press, has their shops completely decimated due to the introduction of parking charges. So I'm surprised that you say you don't think that businesses will suffer. So these are my initial questions to yourself or the Cabinet, please.
Firstly, I'll take the first one first,
Yes.
the free period. This has been investigated and looked at, as you'll have heard so far from the questions and answers that we've had. I'm sure,
But not debated.
I can't speak for the members of the Cabinet. Sorry. They may wish to raise this in debate. I'd be happy if they were to, but we haven't got to the debate yet. Tendering. Now that's, I did read the paper that you forwarded on tendering. I will make a few comments on that. Firstly, tendering are looking at a forecast budget shortfall of 3 million, not 6.7 million over the next 3 to 4 years. Secondly, I note that permit system that they are operating for residents is not available in all of their car parks, and one of the car parks in particular, one of the car parks in particular it's not available in is the Frinton and Walton swimming pool car park. Now we're looking at providing free parking for our leisure centre users. So that's another thing. And also you've got to remember that tendering has a huge number of car parking spaces, far more than we do, and many of which are geared to the visitor market, to people coming to Clacton, coming to the other coastal towns, Frinton, Walton, and they make a huge amount of income from those visitors. That they're able through this to be able to subsidise that permit system for their residents. You cannot compare tendering with Babergh, I'm afraid. The economies of the car park the car parks are completely different. The last point, sorry, what's the last point?
You had said earlier that you didn't think
the
that
businesses, yeah.
would suffer.
Yeah.
Businesses are very concerned, particularly in Hadley.
I know that. I know they're concerned.
They're on the brink.
Yeah, and I do understand that. I know businesses are concerned, and we wouldn't want to do anything that would harm them. The comparison with Ipswich and Colchester I don't think is valid. They have far higher parking charges than we're ever considering, or indeed any other small market town considers. And certainly with Ipswich, a number of their specific problems are not just parking related. There are other factors involved which are having a detrimental impact on the town centre here. But as I said, if we look at small market towns, those nearby, Stowmarket, Woodbridge, Beccles, Haverhill, Saxmundham, wherever, they're all doing very well. Their businesses have not been impacted by the modest parking charges that they have. The vacancy rates that exist in those towns are comparable to our towns, and so you can see from that they don't have a particular problem with shop vacancies. So the evidence just simply isn't there, but we will keep a close eye on it. Any other? Councillor Dowling, you were next, yes.
Thank you, Chair. My thunder's been slightly stolen by Councillor Grandon, but I'm used to that. I'd like to rephrase my question more as a plea to Cabinet in the light of the evidently widespread objections by councillors, by residents and businesses to the proposal as it stands. Will Cabinet please amend the proposal to allow 1 hour free in all Babergh-controlled car parks? This concession would meet the concerns of many objectors regarding the impact on local economies and on vulnerable individuals, and it would show that the Council is listening and is willing to act accordingly. Thank you.
We will return to this in the debate. Councillor Owen.
Thank you. Businesses will be affected twice. Season tickets goes up by 20%. And the customers have to pay for the car parking. Do you think that's fair?
Season tickets for business, the shop workers you're referring to?
It'll be for people who work in there. They're going to have to pay, aren't they?
Well, they already have to pay.
Yeah, but it's going up for 20%.
It's going up, yes. It hasn't
so do you think that's fair?
It hasn't risen for quite some time, but we will always monitor the season ticket amounts and to see whether the proposed rise there is sustainable or not. But the principle of having a season ticket for people who use car parks all day on a regular basis is one that already exists. So it's just a matter of making sure we set that at the right level.
Quick one as well.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask the Cabinet, how many Cabinet members visit Sudbury, Hadley and Lavenham who are going to be affected by these car parking charges? I'm sorry if that sounded personal, but I don't see many of you in Sudbury. I don't know if you go to Hadley.
I visit Sudbury on a regular basis. I live 5 minutes from Hadley. It's my local town. I go there all the time, at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. Yes, Councillor Hendry, and then, and then Councillor Riley after that. Yeah. Councillor Hendry.
Sorry.
Yeah. Councillor Hendry first, and then Councillor Riley.
I have a question about the consultation and the engagement process. I represent Great Cornard. There's been a lot of talk about, and I know there's been a lot of work done with Sudbury and Hadley and Lavenham, and some of their views have been taken into consideration. Great Cornard is actually the second largest ward in Babergh, and we have very few facilities. Most people in Cornard have to go to Sudbury for the majority of their business. We have less facilities than a lot of the much smaller villages. We've also, contain a lot of deprived areas where people are really struggling with the cost of living. And yet Great Cornard seems to have been missed out on the engagement process. And despite numerous requests, they still have not had an in-person meeting with Mark Ems. And I appreciate that they did send an email in response to the survey, but there was no engagement further to that. And I'd like to know why that was, because I feel that Great Cornard should have been listened to and should have had an opportunity to put their point across, and also to have some of their concerns allayed, because having a meeting with them may have made them understand the situation a bit more. And I'd just like to know why that wasn't done, please.
Thank you. Mark, can you respond to that, please?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes, Chair. I'm trying to set up a meeting with Great Cornard. Myself and Matt are happy to come and meet with the council. We have been trying to exchange some dates and try and get together, but that hasn't worked out so far. We've had Great Cornard's correspondence from Great Cornard from the engagement, and obviously from the 8th of January where they stated as their opening line, Great Cornard Parish Council maintains and reiterates its long-standing complete opposition to the introduction, extension or increase in car parking charges in any car park owned or managed by, maintained by Babergh District Council. So we do want to get there, we do want to discuss. I'm happy if they've got positive, options they can put towards it.
Councillor Hendry.
I do appreciate that, but do you not think that, obviously we've got the Cabinet meeting today where this is being discussed, do you not think that this should have been done prior to that? And they did request a meeting in that email of was it the 9th of January, So that has been nearly 3 months. And the reason for that delay was because they weren't included in the initial, whereas Sudbury, Hadley and Lavenham were, and they weren't included. Nobody had thought about maybe we should speak to Cornard.
I can only apologise for that. We're happy to discuss with Great Cornard. It hasn't been any kind of deliberate act not to talk to Great Cornard. So yeah, we're still happy to have that conversation.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just turn everybody to Appendix C, please? I have a query on support services, where we are going up from the budget book of 142,000 to, we're doubling it to the full cost forecast to 313,000, and then off we go to the races. So the question really is, why have the overheads and the like doubled? I mean, is this when we're suffering from tyranny by spreadsheet?
Okay, can I hand that over? Is that something you want to pick up, Jack?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can answer that for you, Councillor Riley. So the figures that you're referring to is the full cost recovery model, and that's effectively nearly doubled compared to the budget book figure. So those corporate overheads are already included in the budget that's been agreed. However, they're from the resources of other services, sustainable travel, assets. They all have an input into the service of running the car parks. However, they're segregated in different services. So when you're trying to build a picture of the full cost of car parking, that's why they've been included in that. So it's not an increase in the overall cost to Babergh District Council. It's already been included, but we're showing it as a cost to car parking.
So just so I can clarify this, so in other words, the budget book did not have all the costs relevant to the car parks.
That's one way of putting it. I would say that it's the budget book's purpose is to show an accountable budget manager's area that they're responsible for. Because lots of services make up car parking, it's been included in different areas. So the budget figure's not wrong in the budget book, but corporate overheads encompass every service.
Can I just quickly clarify? The 313,000, this figure, it runs forward, the support services. These figures are monitored and controlled. I mean, they're not just take place and then get scooped up.
So the corporate overheads are your human resources, finance, communications. They're all monitored and scrutinised and set as a budget in their own right. So they don't just run away. They are under the same kind of scrutiny and budget setting process that we've recently been through.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, we go further ahead, but I appreciate the answer I've been given.
Good, thank you. Councillor Grandon.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask, one of my concerns is that once we break the 3 hours free period model, that then gives the opportunity for the council to then put up the prices of the parking in further years, in future years. Can you tell me, firstly, how long it is planned to retain the prices that you propose in the report? And then secondly, I would like to ask for a different or an additional free period, because at the moment the paper says that we're offering Sundays and bank holidays at no charge. Certainly in Hadley, that's of very little service because nearly everything's closed. There's a couple of pubs and one cafe open on Sundays. and that is all that is open on a Sunday. So that is no concession really, certainly in Hadley. I don't know about the other places. So a more useful free period instead, or in addition, a more useful time would be perhaps starting the charging at 10 o'clock or making charging free at lunchtimes or something like that. So they're my two other questions, please.
Take that second one first. We may well return to that in the debate. There would have to be a reason for it, but we can look into that. The first one, paragraph 6.4, although it says biannually instead of biennially, the intention is to review every 2 years. There needs to be a correction to the report, but it'll be every 2 years.
Yeah, so I mean, that's quite concerning. So what might seem not very much in your words, quite a lot to some people, the pound, is likely to be reviewed and go up in 2 years' time, and maybe every 2 years after that.
Well, we have to review these things. We can't set something in stone.
So that's the problem, you know, once you break this model of the 3 hours free, it's a license to just carry on going up and up and up. So what you might be saying in the report is...
We review the long-term rates on a regular basis. We'll review all rates on a regular basis. I mean, we review council tax. We review all of our fees and charges. That's the whole point with discretionary service charging. They do get reviewed. Most of them get reviewed each year.
But the problem is it has an impact on our businesses.
We'll come back to this in the debate. I think we're probably in a position now where we can move to the Cabinet debate. So I will thank members for their questions. There has been some thought-provoking questions raised. And we will go back to the Cabinet debate. And there are a number of things I think we do need to pick up in the debate, which have been raised. Obviously, we want to return to the issue of the community interest company. We want to look at the issue of the school run. This vexed question of should there or shouldn't there be any kind of a free period. We would need to debate that. And then, of course, at some point, I do want to talk about the proposal from Lavenham and what we do with Lavenham in particular. So, who would like to? Councillor McCraw, you can open the debate.
Not so much opening the debate, Chair. Councillor Davis and myself were thinking that it might be appropriate to take a short 10-minute recess before entering debate for anybody who needs that.
That's probably a good idea, yes.
Been at this an hour and a half, and I think
let's do that, yes. I was anxious to keep going, but no, you're quite right. We'll have a short break, 10 minutes, and then we'll come back in 10 minutes' time. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. The Cabinet is now in debate, so who would like to open the debate? Anyone? Councillor McCraw, would you like to start?
Thank you, Chair. I have to get myself ready. Car parking. This is my third go-around on this subject in the course of the last 8 to 9 years. And I remember every single part of it, all 3 periods, one dating to the first administration I wasn't involved in, I was in opposition. Then one last time round where a decision was made, not implemented, but made. Now, I'm not going to refer to those previous proposals and reports, although there are some things in common, but I have recalled everything and all the experience and the reports that have been presented, including those of my outside consultants with experience in the area. My basic principle in addressing this subject has been one of fairness. We have a principle, we're British, we queue, we believe in fairness, and I think that is how I'd like to approach this. Car parking is not free, it costs. Somebody pays for it. There are costs involved in running a car parking service. There are also costs in enforcement. In fact, enforcement generally does cost a little more than it brings in, from experience looking at the figures that have been provided by officers. So no such thing as free, but nobody can be happy about having to pay for something that they once got for what they believe to have been free. Okay. So there's 4 groups I think I want to consider here, and this is what I've been thinking about over the last few weeks, and I want to address the concerns and fears of those 4 groups. And the first would be the users of our car parking services, primarily in Sudbury, Hadley and Lavenham, but I think it's often overlooked. I'm pretty sure Councillor Davies will agree with me that the Shotley car parking, which works perfectly well, on very similar charges to the ones being proposed here, has not been a controversial issue whatsoever. So costs of motoring. It's really tough running a car these days. The average cost, according to figures I've looked up, of running a car in the UK in 2024 is £3,834. That's an average car. And the largest amount of that is the purchase and depreciation, which is some 36%. Fuel would be the next 23%. And I think fuel's a really interesting point when we're discussing free car parking. To drive to a car park, you are going to use fuel. If you are figuring a litre of fuel at around £1.50 costs, £1.50 costs will carry you roughly 7 to 9 miles. Let's average it at 8 miles. So within a 4-mile radius, you're already spending £1.50 in fuel alone to take up this car parking space and to use it. Insurance, I've seen massive increases in our own insurance this year. And of course, the insurance companies, nobody ever complains out loud or in public or making a fuss about the increased cost to them because, well, frankly, like the fuel companies, they don't care. They're not listening. We're obliged to because we're a democratically organised body. Repairs and servicing is another 12%, £472. Road tax is even 4.5%. And after that, every other cost associated with motoring comes in at less than 1%. Parking is the largest one of those, but we're talking the average here, in this report anyway, is £29 a year. It's not a lot of money. Now let's look at the actual proposals for these charges. £1, £1.50, £2, £2.50. Well, with inflation, everything's gone up in price. A packet of biscuits I saw the other day for £1.50. Ginger nuts, in case you want to know. I'm aware of the cost of things. A newspaper, £1 for at one end of the market, and £2.50 or more at the other end of the market. A cup of coffee. I was talking to somebody at the bus stop this morning on my way in, and she asked about this, and I said, well, you know, what the fees were between £1, £2.50. She said, you couldn't get a cup of coffee for that. I said, well, you might get a cup of vending machine coffee for the £1. So the costs relative to real life and normal everyday things that we don't even think about when we do it is next to nothing. £1 is, as I say, the sort of thing you put in a vending machine and forget. I've paid car parking fees from one end of the country to the other. Before I came here, I went across the road down by the river and looked at the car park that is closest to this place. And their charge is £1.20 for the first hour, £2.40 for the next hour, £3.60, £4.80, and the all-day charge, I believe, is £6.20. And that's not exactly a particularly well-sited car park close to any shops, but it is used. All right, maybe perhaps it's used for this local government hub, but even so, people will pay for car parking, because I've observed over the years that observational studies, how people behave, the reports and the experts in the subject have said for many, many years, people do pay what they regard as reasonable, fair charges, £1 or £2. That's reasonable, that's fair, and it's pretty small. If they didn't, every car park run by a county council, district or other council in the country would be empty. And they're not. Observably, they are not. So that's the first group. I don't think these are unfair by any means. I think, in fact, they're entirely reasonable relative to the cost of other things and the fact that other things have increased in cost. Businesses. Now, the businesses we've always been concerned about. I think it could be argued that one of the reasons that perhaps we didn't implement the last set of proposals for car parking, which were agreed by a previous cabinet, of which I was part, we delayed implementing those, perhaps because of fear of allowing those businesses to recover from COVID. I think we've largely reached the point where that can be said. Other pressures have taken their precedence there, particularly inflation. Now, the businesses have got their pressures. I cannot imagine there is a single business in any of these places which has been able to freeze its prices for the last 5 years. Possibly longer, but they certainly have had to put their prices up, and quite substantially. They're probably more than £1 or £2, or £2.50, our maximum charge, in the average total spend in any particular business. And that also applies, by the way, to the provision of services. I'd like those businesses to consider that they are as perfectly reasonable. They have to make a profit. This is how they work. Businesses need to make a surplus. There's a significant difference here. We don't, and we're not trying to. We're looking to recover our costs. And that's not given to a business. Businesses might have loss leaders in some instances, but they have to make it back in the totality. We cannot treat car parking, if you like, as a council service that is a loss leader, much as we might have liked to and much as we effectively have done over the last few years. And I also think, well, how would those businesses exist if only 2% of their customers were actually paying and giving these businesses money? 98% of our car parking events are free as we stand at the moment. And the majority will be within that first hour. And I mention this because when we come to the question of whether we can support an hour, I think the report addresses this already. That hour is not supportable. It basically makes the entire premise of this paper and approach redundant. We know what we need to do. Those businesses wouldn't survive on 2% of paying customers, and nor can we if we're going to provide a proper car parking service. The third group I'm going to talk about are the non-users. That's the majority of the district in many ways, because not only is it people in Sudbury and Hadley and Lavenham that use the car parks, but there are a lot of non-users within those communities. I'm sure there are non-users in Shotley as well. The vast majority of the non-users are across the district. And effectively, with our having to use our resources to subsidise car parking, it is those people who are not getting any benefit because they don't use the car parks there. They don't get anything back for it, and they can't genuinely understand why that should be the case. Everybody else elsewhere is subsidising, and as I said, this is not a free process. I've read everything that's been sent from Hadley, Sudbury, Lavenham, and I have to say I was very pleased to read the Lavenham proposals because they seem to me to be constructive. They seem to me to be approaching the matter with an open mind, and they have made some serious proposals that we would be discussing later, and I will be probably supporting those once we've gone into the minutiae. And then the fourth group is the councils, not least Babergh District Council itself. Now, the report covers the facts, the issues, the options, and many of the things that have been talked about in the submissions from various people, individuals, and councils are actually covered in the report. Many of the questions actually asked about things that were covered in the report. I support the conclusions presented in the report. There are things that are possible, there are things that are not possible, and in fact would be unwise. We can look at the tinkering in the margins, the little, and then they're quite important things about, short trips, about school drop-off, school pick-up. All of these things can be dealt with within the construction on the paper, because the proposals give the director the opportunity to consult and the authority to consult and arrange schemes for parking permits and so on. The councils have made their submissions, read them. I think we have to look at this in a realistic sense. There's no appetite for, that I've heard of, in approaching Sudbury or Hadley Town Council. They have been approached in the past as to whether they would like to take on the parking services. Now, I just happened to notice that, that they feasibly could have. If we look at the proportion of the increases in council tax over the last year and what the actual levels of the precepts are for these councils, Sudbury has a Band D precept for an individual household of 173.66. That is 92% of the entire Babergh precept. Hadley has a precept of 137.05. That is 73% of the Babergh precept. So they feasibly could, with a transfer and all the rest of it. But I still hold, as I've said about this and CIC companies, that without that willingness to undertake, without a definite person who wants, for example, to run a CIC, and I don't mean some vague expression of interest, we have a decision to make, and we have to make it today. My conclusions are these. The report has the facts, it gives the issues and the options, but the responsibility is ours. This can't be kicked into the long grass any longer. We face a financial situation over the next 3 years that this will only partly address. That responsibility is what we were elected for. I think the fears are unjustified. I think people need to park and accept reality, and we would have to consider cutting something else, something also non-statutory. There's a lot of good stuff that I would deeply regret when the cost to solve this issue, or at least address it, is relatively small, proportionate, will not have the impact in terms of all the studies I've read on how people actually park and their ability to accept reasonable charges. This has been talked about at times, and I must say there's been some unpleasantness in this, as though this was some great civil rights matter destined to destroy civilization as we know it. It isn't. It's not let my people go, it's a quid or two. It's perfectly reasonable and it's fair. It's fair to everybody. So I will be supporting the basic assumptions in the report. More than happy to discuss some of the little bits and pieces, Lavenham proposals and so on. But I will not support an hour's free parking because, as the report says, that opportunity has been and gone. It did exist some years ago. We didn't implement it. In retrospect, I rather regret the non-implementation because we might not have been in such a bad position as we find ourselves now. But we can't dodge this any longer. A decision needs to be made today, and I exhort all my Cabinet colleagues to do so.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw, for those very clear insights. Does anyone else wish to pick up the debate? Councillor Carter.
Thank you. If I can start by picking up on what Councillor Owen asked about who uses the car parks. I no longer actually live in Sudbury, and I live in a very rural village away from anything. We don't have anything there. And aside from the fact that I am a councillor for Sudbury, I drive to Sudbury for no end of reasons, to do my shopping, to get many of my kids' haircut, to go to their clubs, all of those things, and so I am often there. I lived in Hadley for a number of years, and it always draws me back because it's a brilliant place, even if it is just for to take the dogs out for a walk or to use one of the cafes. Lavenham is where my doctor's surgery is. It's where my pharmacy is. Again, there's some great places there to go and visit. I'm at the low end of the income spectrum. My partner is a full-time carer for our disabled daughter, and the majority of our combined income is made up on universal credit. So having to pay for these car parks will just be an added amount to what it is that we have to pay out, as I'm sure it will for many, especially those who are actually on an even lower income than we are. Will there be times where myself and others will have to stop these journeys out because actually we're living paycheck to paycheck, and having to pay an extra £1 or £2 would actually mean that we wouldn't be able to visit these places on such a frequent basis. The reality is that yes, that will happen. And as I said, it's not just me. It will be many. Picking up on some points that Councillor McCraw has just made, taking into consideration the cost of running a car. Again, if you live in a village such as I do, you have no choice but to run a car. I have 6 children, all of which go to different schools. I have to drive all over Suffolk to take them. Many schools don't have parking, so you have to park up, not on residential streets, and you have to take them in. So the cost of that, £1 per time, twice a day, 190 school days in a year, roughly, that's around £400 per child. 2 children's schools, that's £800 a year. Again, I don't have that money, and I know that many families will feel the same way. Sometimes you have to drive. We don't have the public transport links that we should have. People have to take into the fact how much that their car costs and just deal with the fact that they have to pay for it, and now we are asking them to pay even more. You speak about non-users who don't use the car parks. Perhaps they're not shopping in Babergh, perhaps they're choosing to do their shopping or their leisure activities elsewhere, but we all pay for services that we don't use. But this way they are supporting not just the economy of Babergh, but as I mentioned earlier, the health and well-being of those who are using health centres, they're going to counselling, they're going to parenting groups, all of these things which they, I suppose up until now, may have taken for granted, and now going to have to look at, can we afford to do such things? And lastly, I'm hoping it will come into debate again, but regarding the CIC, yes, the Chamber of Commerce have come forward and they have said, yes, we would be interested, like we were interested before. Town councils possibly haven't come forward because they were looking to see what today's outcome were. Hadley and Sudbury were fighting and were pleading for retaining the 3 hours free parking, and they didn't want to enter into negotiations about CIC because that is what they wanted to keep. So I think that to be fair to them, I know Councillor McCraw has said that we have to make a decision today. I would like to see it deferred because I would like to see them given the opportunity to say, this is what Cabinet have set their minds on. Is this now something that you want to negotiate into? I also think that it should be deferred because I think, again, as Councillor McCraw has said, Cabinet has spoken about this for many years. The majority of us are new Cabinet members. We haven't had these discussions for many years. We've got new councillors who haven't had the opportunity to speak about this for many years. We haven't looked at this in the depth that I believe that it should have been looked into. This isn't just about making up our budget. This is about ensuring that Babergh residents and those that are visiting Babergh, paying into our economy, have the incentive to come to our towns and to spend money in our towns and to spend a considerable amount of time here and to use all our services. I think as Councillor Hendry mentioned earlier about Cornard yet being consulted, it doesn't matter if they're consulted afterwards, it's too late. We are discussing it today, and the population of Cornard is huge, and they deserve to have their say, and they deserve to have their wishes heard and their concerns heard. So I think that we're rushing into this too much. I don't think we've had enough time to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Chair. Well, Jesse, you covered quite a lot I would have already mentioned, and I just want to pick up on page 91, which talks about the consultation. 72 respondents, 84% providing response about sustainable transport. Comments here are that public transport, bus travel limited or needs improvement counts for 47 mentions, 55%. Lacking of cycle paths, 24%. Routes, safe walking routes, pedestrian routes, 12%. 7% bike parking facilities. Now, by its own admission, this consultation is saying we are still too car dependent in our area. In Babergh, we are needing the car, regardless of whether we think it's the right choice or not. Environmentally, we are car dependent. That is a fact. There are lots of things we could, should, maybe have done in previous administrations, but both me and my colleague, Councillor Carter, were not here for. We were not there to have those debates to talk about and to raise that issue, that standard. 2019, a different change, obviously, with the climate emergency. But here, it says in black and white, number of respondents here have all stated sustainable transport options would more or less get them out of their cars. 14% say it wouldn't change. I think there's an awful lot still feel that they need their cars to be ready and be on the road and be able to visit these towns. Just think that on that basis, we can't go forth with the subsidy. We could go forth with the subsidy on the CIC route, open to that idea. We are rushing this through too quickly, too easily, without care and due diligence to do its work. And therefore I'll have problems with accepting any subsidy that ends up being paid for car parks, whatever the charge. And Woodbridge is a very different set of circumstances, very different on economies of scale. So that's my 2 pence worth.
Thank you, Councillor. Who would like to go next? Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of the points have been covered, as we've already said. But again, I was in the previous administration, and Councillor Carter quite rightly pointed out we made mistakes. One of those mistakes was not implementing the car parking charges when we agreed them. They were there, and we could have agreed. And as Councillor Dowling pointed out, at that time, Councillor Busby and myself, and you'll remember this, we argued for free car parking for the first hour, but it's not free. Obviously, it's subsidised, so there's no such thing as free car parking. And that paper, had that actually been implemented, would have included free parking for the first hour. However, we've lost literally hundreds of thousands of pounds since then. Because we didn't implement it, we're even further behind than we should have done. And I would suggest, let's not make the same mistake again. We need to make a decision. The paper, and I know people criticise papers, I think Mark Ems and his team have done an excellent job. I mean, it's so thorough, the amount of work that's gone into that. And I know people may not like it, and they may not like this page or that point, but overall, it's a really good paper. It's far more in depth than we had presented to us 3-4 years ago as an administration, which Alistair's overview and scrutiny looked at. It's far more in depth than that. And it shows the reasons. And as much as I was in favour of an hour's free parking or not charging those users at the time, that's changed. And I'm afraid I agree with what is now being suggested and being proposed. We can't afford to do it. It's just not viable for a majority, for a whole variety of reasons which have been eloquently pointed out in the paper. And I think about the businesses. And Councillor Owen, I go to Sudbury, Hadley and Lavenham and indeed many other towns. And yes, I'll have to pay now. And, you know, that's a shame. But if I use something, I expect to pay for it. I have to pay in other towns that I go to. And you know, I'm going to be a poor pensioner soon. You know, I'm not on UCL or anything, but, you know, it affects all of us. But my belief is if the offer is good enough, and it's been mentioned about Pin Mill, pay there, people have always paid there. If the offer is good enough, people will go and they will pay the charges. If it's not good enough, they won't go, obviously, or they'll find something else. So I think we need to do that. Hadley High Street is really resilient. I mean, you look at, you know, when it lost its one of its biggest employers, when Babergh moved here, where we are now, you know, which Councillor Grandin supported that move. That affected the businesses far more than probably anything else. Then there was COVID. Absolutely fantastic recovery. The businesses recovered really strongly, not just in Hadley, obviously, but everywhere else. And I noticed that a new business is opening up in Sudbury. Well, that new business wouldn't have opened up in Sudbury unless it was confident that it was going to get the footfall and that they're fully aware of these impending charges for the town, perhaps, if that's a decision. But they would have factored that in, and businesses do. Businesses are more resilient, we give them credit for, and they look at everything, and they know what they need to do. And again, if the offer is good enough, people will use that particular coffee shop, for example, and everywhere else. In Hadley High Street, again, some great offers there, you know, with various cafes and pubs and the shops. And it's interesting, we mentioned about Lavenham. Their proposal, if you're not already aware, is that they want to charge for Sundays and bank holidays because they're a tourist town and it's a beautiful village or town, whatever you want to call it, and it's beautiful, and they want to actually charge. Councillor Grandin said, oh, it doesn't matter about Sunday. Well, there's many church users that would disagree. They use the car parks and they get it for free, and they will continue to not have to, for it. Yeah, they won't have to be paid. Obviously, all the rest of the taxpayers will be paying that, or the whole district. So I would say, and I understand Councillor Carter and Councillor Potters want to kick it down the road a little bit, but look at the paper. We've gone through this many, many times, and you don't have to be an old councillor or an experienced councillor to see everything that's here. So we need to make the decision today. That's what we're here for. We're the cabinet, we're the decision makers. We need to make that decision. And I understand the reasons why Hadley and Sudbury and indeed Lavenham fight their corner so very, very well. I totally understand that. But this is a district-wide decision. And there are many people, it's been pointed out that 48% mentioned that they were about the various things. The other 52% made up of all sorts, but there's a whole district out there. And certainly on the peninsula, yes, they'll go to Chelmerdiston, to Pin Mill to use the car park there, if they're there, or to the pub car park. But for the majority of the peninsula, they resent it. And I tell you, this is not a new thing. They resent subsidising car parking in the towns. You know, why do the towns get all the benefits is a common refrain that we get on the peninsula, and I'm sure many other villages as well. So I think you know where I sit on this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sally Davis.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would resist kicking it down the road as well. I seem to have been living and breathing car parking for several weeks. I've read everything, I've heard everything, and I've looked really, really carefully at it, because this is a hard decision, because I hear everything that the residents of Hadley and Sudbury and Lavenham are saying. And I really do hope that in some way we can nuance it so that the concerns raised by Councillor Carter in terms of people who are having a hard time financially and school drop-offs, I think we can maybe nuance it so that that sort of hardship is done away with. Towns and cities deteriorate for a number of reasons. It's not just £1 or £2 on the car parking charge. I cannot accept opinion and conjecture masquerading as fact. It's almost like if you say something enough times, it becomes fact. And I've heard so many times that the businesses in the towns will fail. I don't believe that, like Councillor Davis. I think they're not as fragile as that. And you know, they do deteriorate for a number of reasons, but £1 or £2 on a car park, I don't think is going to make that much difference. If I was convinced of that, I would reconsider what I think about it, but I'm absolutely not convinced. I obviously don't believe as well, like Councillor Davis, that there are what has been described as widespread objections. Well, again, this is a district-wide matter, and out in East Bergholt, we have to go to Ipswich or Colchester to shop. We pay a lot more than £1 or £2 when we do that. We pay for a lot of things we don't use. You know, one of the arguments is that, but these are essential mandatory things. I don't pay for adult social care at the moment. Thank God I don't have to pay for homelessness support, but these are mandatory things that in a civilised society we must provide, and we accept that we don't use them, but we pay for them. I cannot see how free car parking comes within the same category there. I also have to say that actually this is an opportunity to invest in sustainable transport. Some of this money will be used to help make our budget better, but we will have an opportunity to invest in sustainable transport, which we wouldn't have otherwise. We can get match funding. So as we go through to the future and we bring in more money because of these car parks, we can actually, you know, reduce this car dependency that we have. And ultimately, it's a discretionary service, the car park. We don't have to provide it, so as far as I'm concerned, we have a responsibility to get it to cover its costs. And we have a responsibility as the Cabinet for the rest of the district and for the very future of this council, because we must address this budget deficit, and to me, the amount of funds that this would bring in has to be an essential part of that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on record as saying I'm not enamoured of charging for car parking, but I'm also on record as saying that I am not prepared to see leisure centres limit their hours or even close. I'm not prepared to see our funding for community groups that give advice to people who are in debt, cold, have problems with their landlords. I'm not in favour of cutting that. We recently listened to our officers give us a very good paper on the homelessness situation in Babergh. We are not immune from homelessness. In fact, we have a growing problem with it, and that problem may grow even further given some of the things that the County Council is planning. I would make it clear that I represent a ward which has 7 rural villages within it. They are all dependent on the car because we have, in my particular village, 3 buses a day. They all use Hadley, they all use Sudbury, and not one of the parish councils I represent have made representations to me about car parking. I wish we didn't have to do this, but we are on the edge of an economic precipice at the moment. We have made it very clear what our future budget position is. This is not the only thing that we are going to have to do. And we were elected to take hard decisions. Believe me, I wish that this one we could, like the last administration, kick it into the long grass. We can't. We have to do it. I am totally prepared to discuss rebating, as Councillor Davis has said. We want to ensure that people who are in financial difficulties, that we can find ways of helping them, and we are absolutely committed to doing that. If there was an alternative, nobody who has spoken to me or sent me emails, nobody has given me any suggestions as to other things that we can cut. This is a discretionary service. It's a service that many councils, in fact the majority of councils, charge for. And we have to grasp the nettle, and I am afraid that we have to take this very hard decision, but also find ways of mitigating the impact on those in society who are vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Helen Davis.
Thank you. I think Councillor Saw's right. It's a hard decision that we're faced with. No one wants to pay more than they absolutely have to. But we are in a hole, and that's been drummed into us, and we've all looked at the figures, and they are not great. And I'm really not looking forward to the budget for next year, because I've got a feeling that's going to be even worse. That said, I think there's a couple of things that we have to bake into this to make it more acceptable. And rather than just look at the school permit system, I would say we do it. I'm sure you can figure out a viable solution. And I would also say, you know, if you're in receipt of universal credit, as Councillor Carter has said she is, again, you would look at a permit system for that. I would bake that in. So you're tailoring this towards the people that can better afford to pay, rather than the ones that can't afford to pay. And along with Councillor Saw, I have not heard of any alternate suggestions as to what to cut. And having been through the budget, you know, I think practically all of it is something that you really wouldn't want to cut, because, you know, the services that are being provided are very basic services that, you know, we need for, you know, good functioning in the district. I would hate to have to cut anything from, say, the homelessness strategy. To me, that's just inhumane. So I would like to see those additional bits added in, because I don't see them in the recommendations here. The other thing that I think would be useful is, after this decision has been made, assuming we vote yes, it would be good to see the impact of the charges on the town centres, to see if the fears that have been raised do actually you know, turn into reality. And also, will it have the financial impact we expect? So if we cover the costs and there's some profit, great, but that profit needs to be ring-fenced for sustainable travel solutions, like, you know, a bus to a village in turn each day for Sudbury, or something, or the introduction or building of a new cycle path, which would be probably quite good, keep people fit as well. So while it's hard, I mean, I'm heading towards, you know, a regretful yes, provided those pieces I've just mentioned are baked into that agreement.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Derek Davis.
Just a point of clarification, really, Chair. I totally agree with Councillor Davies' assumption there. But do we have, in terms of 3.6 down to 3.10, where the Director of Operations has that ability to look at those various things, do we need to actually strengthen that, or does the monitoring officer or the chair think that those recommendations are good enough as they are? And obviously Mark Ems and his team have listened to what we've had to say and the suggestions that have come forward. So do we need to make those stronger, or is a delegated authority enough?
I think certainly in terms of the school run permit, we probably could put in something that's specifically around that. I don't know, monitoring officer, do you think we would need to add anything specific to those recommendations?
Sometimes it's easier to be actually a little bit more loose, but you've got the authority for the Director of Operations and Parking Services. I would suggest that you also add in with in consultation with the portfolio holder, so that you can ensure that you get what you want out of those recommendations, so that there's that added check.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, and in terms of the school run permit, we do know that Ipswich operates something like that. They give 20 minutes parking for permit holders. I think it's £25 a year is the annual fee, isn't it? So we could look at something like that. And I think, Councillor Carter, you'd be keen for that to be means tested in some way, so that those who really are struggling that would not have to pay that. So that's certainly something I think we could really look into. But in terms of the recommendations, I think it probably covers that. Is there anything else on that before we move on to because the next subject I wanted to go on to was the matter of the Lavenham communication. Councillor Helen Davis.
Sorry, just one more thing I should have mentioned. I don't see in the recommendation enough precision around allowing people who are running into the surgery to pick up prescriptions to be able to have the free parking. Is that in there?
That's probably it's more problematic, is it? Mark, would you like to come back on that one?
I think in terms of, we'll engage with the health centres. There's a health centre in Lavenham and a health centre in Hadley. Mobile screening facility that uses the Kingfisher Leisure Centre in Sudbury as well. So we can set up virtual permit panels inside those facilities, which will allow people, whether they're collecting a prescription or whether they're attending a appointment, to get a free park for that period.
Okay. Okay, so are you happy with that, Councillor Davis?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Carter.
If I can just follow up on a couple of points that were made. I'll go backwards, if that's okay. When looking at health centres, I think you do also have to include dentists within that and pharmacies. Not everybody collects their prescription from the doctors directly, but they are still very needed on their prescriptions. And again, looking at the low-end income people who may not necessarily pay for their prescriptions, how are they going to be able to afford charges on top of that? They may be collecting their prescriptions multiple times a week, or it could be less than that, but there are people in certain situations, and I think they all need to be taken into account. Councillor Davies mentioned about a review of the effect that it may have. I think it's more than imperative that has to be conducted, because over the past couple of months, time and time again, I've been told, well, we're just not going to go anymore. We're not going to visit. Why would we pay here when we can go to a bigger town and pay somewhere else where actually there's more services that are being offered? So I think it would be really ignorant and really foolish of us not to look at the effects and come back and scrutinise that in however many months. I think there will be an initial period of people who just won't visit Sudbury and Hadley, or they will park on residential streets, making residential parking so much worse, and for those of us that are county councillors, giving us a load more work to do. It's been mentioned about we are elected to make hard decisions. Yes, we are, but we are also been elected to listen to what people have said, and it isn't just the signatures that were collected on the petition, it's the countless emails that we've had, it's the in-person conversations that we've had, and it is our job to, as elected officials, to represent those views, and I don't believe that's what's being done here today. And it's been mentioned that if charges weren't to be put in, that something else may have to be cut, but no one's offered an alternative. Well, surely that's our job to look at the alternatives. And then to offer that out back to people and to say, well, actually, if you do want this, you may have to lose A, B, or C. But nowhere has that discussion gone out to the public at all. Residents are completely unaware of that. And perhaps if they were given those choices, those options, then we might be having the same conversation, we might be having a different conversation. But yeah, I feel it is our job to represent the views, and I think within the consultation, within the petition, those views were collected and aren't necessarily being heard. Thank you.
On the matter of dentists, I think we could probably speak to dentists. Is that possible, Mark?
So just to clarify, Chair, we'd envisage that we would speak to the 2 health centres which are directly accessed off our car parks, that we wouldn't be going around the local area of towns, villages, etc., wherever there could be any form of private or non-private health facility around, and installing terminals in those premises which would allow free car parking somewhere else effectively as well. So this is the car park health centre in Lavenham that comes directly off the Cockhouse Inn car park there, and the health centre in Hadley off the back of the Topsfield car park there. And we'd expect to engage and speak with those health centres, and hopefully they would engage positively with us as well to put a solution in place.
Thank you. And certainly in terms of high street pharmacies, people nipping in and out of those, there's on-street parking which can be used to service those, so that's not really a... Councillor Carter.
Sorry, just 2 questions from that. I'm sure there are some in Hadley, forgive me, I don't know, but like Meadow Lane surgery in Sudbury has no parking, there's no on-street parking. You have the Kingfisher car park, Roy's car park, Station Road car park, where you would have to park. It seems a bit discriminatory against them that they wouldn't be offered those. And again, with dentists, are you saying that dentists wouldn't be included within that? Because I feel that they're just as important as doctors. Whoever I'm asking that to.
Sorry, I was just, Councillor, I was just going to add another element to this. When it comes to enforcement, and if you were having to go to a high street to go to the dentist or the chemist, by the time you've got there, you would have got a parking ticket on your vehicle, because the walk from the car park to get to your location, you wouldn't have had time to get there in order to register your vehicle. So it's really a real issue when it comes to enforcement.
That seems very unfair to those people, just because of where their surgery is, that they wouldn't get there in time. I think that should be looked at somehow.
Okay, thanks. Perhaps certainly that Meadow Lane surgery, could we have some further investigation into that, just to...
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure of that surgery concerned. I mean, as we say,
yeah.
every additional site, every additional place that gets added in, there's a management of this, how it needs to work, dealing with the relationship with those people, dealing with the issues and problems as they occur on a daily, weekly basis. And we've not been planning on integrating that sort of response across all sites, you know, across the community really. This has been in relation to sites that are in connection to our car parks, so like the leisure centres and the health centres, community centre in Lavenham, that are actually accessed on our car parks effectively. You go through one of our car parks to get to these particular sites. We hadn't envisaged extending that out to the high street and town in general.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks. I'm drawing again to the consultation, I apologise, but page 74 says it here, in individual town parish councillor, consequences of introducing a parking charge will be that drivers will look to use shops on the high street. They'll then instead drive directly to Morrison's and QD. They can't find parking on that high street. Half an hour's parking will mean that drivers are not likely to buy the newspaper, make that quick shop to the co-op, or go to Morrison's and QD. So you've got these other alternatives, you've got these other choices. You now have shop floor space that's given more now to clothing and all other items to adapt to different challenges in the high street. So you've got those changes there. You've got then Roy's, for example, in Sudbury, where they have a Babergh controlled car park. If they're paying for the privilege of using Roy's, what happens there? It's a much older store, it will have difficulties. I'm sure if people have other choices and opportunities, they'll go elsewhere online and so on. So there's all kinds of variations, but there's a lot of talk as well. And it comes right through the whole consultation about the 1 hour free. should really consider this, in all of this rushing and pushing this through, this consideration of 1 hour, it sort of fleshes itself out in this consultation document. I think this is the perfect moment to give consideration and pause. I know that Councillor Simon Dowling has proposed this already. I think that we have to give that due consideration as it comes out so many times in this report.
Thank you, Councillor.
Consultation.
Yeah, thank you. All small market towns have supermarkets on the edge of town. They all have to address this issue of supermarket versus high street. But the supermarkets and the high streets offer different things. Certainly in Hadley, I shop at Morrison's, but I also go to the high street because there's Andrews there, because there's the Adnams store, because there's Ferguson's, and all sorts of other stores. So people do both for different things. And that is the experience of most people. And the same experience in other towns, again, whether it's Stowmarket, Woodbridge, Halstead, Braintree, whatever. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. I think what Councillor Potter has just pointed out speaks to one of the fundamentals of representative democracy. We are the delegate system or the representative system. The delegate that is charged to do what they're told, or the representative who is there to use their judgment. And there's a very famous saying that illustrates this. I'm paraphrasing it slightly. It's by Edmund Burke. And it's, if I sacrifice my judgment to your opinion, these items here are presented as opinions. If I do that, if I sacrifice my judgment to your opinion, I do you no service. We are elected to use our judgment in full possession of the facts. And very often, there will be multiple opinions in our patch. There will be people on both sides of many questions. In those circumstances, this is true of planning as well, but anything else we do, we have no option but to use our judgment and experience and the papers in front of us and the evidence in front of us. And because it's a mistake to try and parrot fashion respond to whatever is presented to you, whether it be, and I'll be frank with you, a petition even. Petitions are in fact represented as one viewpoint, because there will be many people who didn't complete a petition. Their absence of completing that means that they haven't had an opportunity to express any opinion. Again, you've got to use your judgment. So I have to say, be cautious with that approach. It can lead you down some very dangerous paths, and I think we would make a mistake in doing so. And I'm still have to say, we need to make a decision today. This is not something we can kick further into the long grass. And it's been done too many times before.
Thank you. Can I just move on to the matter of the Lavenham correspondence we've received? I just want to summarise the Lavenham proposals. Firstly, they want us to include Sunday and bank holiday charging between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m, the same as we've got in Pinmill. To charge for blue badge holders, again as in Pinmill. And then looking at how that increased income can be used to measure, to fund two things, the reduced rate permits for residents and for workers. And also, of course, that they talk about the refund mechanism or some form of free parking for those visiting the surgery, and also the Village Hall Wellbeing Services for parking in the Cockles car park. Now, we've discussed health centre and other associated uses, and the recommendation 3.7 does already address that as a general principle. So clearly that's something I know that the Director for Operations will take forward with Lavenham and the other health centres. But I do need to stress that I highlighted the suggestions in isolation, but they do need to be read in the context of the points raised in the letter. It was a very long, lengthy and well-constructed correspondence, and so I think that any changes that we would make to accommodate the suggestions from Lavenham will actually mean a deviation from the universal principle that's articulated in paragraph 6.8 and 6.9 of the report. But if we agree that Lavenham has made a strong case to be treated differently, then clearly we go ahead and discuss them with Lavenham. But I didn't know if anyone wanted to comment on the two things in terms of charging with regard to Sunday bank holidays and blue badge holders. Does anyone wish to say anything about those? Councillor Saw.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I would also commend Lavenham for their willingness to engage with the council and its officers, and also to actually come forward with ideas. They have made a good case, and they have laid out why they think Lavenham is different from Sudbury and Hadley. The one area that I would have a strong opinion against their recommendations is their idea of charging blue badge holders. I think as a principle, we couldn't possibly agree to charging blue badge holders. In fact, I think one of the good things about this report is the way the officers have looked at perhaps making parking easier for blue badge holders by giving them bays nearer the street.
Thank you. Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, I would endorse what Councillor Saw has just said, but I would point out as well that, and you'll know who has said this, that it's been pointed out that blue badge holders sometimes don't actually mind paying. It's the convenience of where their bays are. So exactly as Councillor Saw says, the team have looked at making sure that they have good access and that they have priority, if you like, over parking. But fundamentally, I agree with what Councillor Saw has just said.
Councillor McCraw and then Councillor Carter.
I entirely agree with the principle about blue badge holders. Could we not make it clear to blue badge holders that should they wish to pay voluntarily, there is nothing that prevents them from doing so, particularly those people, for example, who donate back their winter heating allowance, the winter fuel allowance. So on the same basis, yeah, fine. But I think a principle that Deborah has mentioned and confirmed by Councillor Davis, absolutely. But hey, if you want to, please do.
Councillor Carter.
I don't really like repeating what's already been said, but just to say you can't charge blue badge holders.
No, I think we're all in agreement on that. Mark.
Sorry, just to add one bit of clarity in this as well from Lavenham's position, I think there is some concern in Lavenham that if parking charges were put in, then more people may apply for blue badges, and there might not be enough blue badge provision. So therefore, why should blue badges be free? Why should blue badges continue to be free in Lavenham? From an officer perspective, the County Council manages that applications process and the strict criteria around there. We don't think that would be the case. We're happy with all our car parks at any stage to continually assess whether we've got the right level of blue badge space provision in the right places in our car parks. And yeah, from an officer perspective, we'd rather it was a universal position across the district.
Councillor Potter, did you want to say something?
Yeah, only just to concur with Councillor Carter that blue badge holders, they've always had a badge where their ability to pay has been hampered by their inability to have real gated employment access to it. And so therefore the blue badge was a sense of, I hasten to use the word charity, but a sense of obligation to help those along their way with different impairments. The qualification process to get a blue badge in the first place is quite strict. It's become stricter over the last few years. So therefore, on the sense of holding one, you are using those free hours of parking, and in positions where you can get best access to shops. It works, I know I mentioned Woodbridge very briefly, it works very well in Woodbridge, where there is a small number of bays, and access is quickly used there on the flattest part of Woodbridge to get into town. And therefore, it should be, given the best possible route to those to get the best access to the shops, and not to be hindered by any cost.
Okay, so we're happy with the idea of the Sunday parking and bank holiday parking charges, not the blue badge, and to discuss with Lavenham some of the finer details around their proposals, particularly looking at how we can channel or hypothecate that additional income towards subsidising permits so that they have a much reduced permit cost for residents and business and shop workers and others in Lavenham. Councillor Derek Davis and Councillor Saul.
I'm just checking, is that an additional recommendation, or again, is that within the 10 that we already have?
Yeah, I think we'll put that as an additional recommendation. Councillor Saul and then Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise the issue of residents parking on street, which I know is a big issue for people, residents of Lavenham. In the report, it appears that in the past there has been some difficulty in getting the county council to agree to these sort of schemes. I would hope that the officers can, and perhaps they already have, use their best efforts to get Suffolk County Council to understand the particular requirements of this medieval village, which is such a net contributor to Babergh's economy. And I would hope that the County Council would be a little more, even though I know they are suffering under extreme financial difficulty, that they would be a bit more amenable to this.
Is that so? Can we impress upon the county the desire of this cabinet to enter into meaningful, providing a meaningful solution for on-street permits in Lavenham?
Yeah, we keep an open dialogue with the county council. As part of this proposal, there's additional officer resource that can carry out more parking study work in towns. So we know Lavenham are already somewhat active in this area anyway, so we should be able to support Lavenham to see if there are opportunities that we can take forward and get agreement with the county council. I fear it will still come down to, and then how much it costs, but it would be good to get to that point with some certainty and have some potential proposals that might benefit Lavenham on the table.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCraw, did you want?
Just on the Lavenham proposals, and I don't know how far officers have got in preparing an addition to the recommendations, it did occur to me that some of those points could be included or by adapting the words in recommendations 3.6 and 3.7, as I'm sure our monitoring officer has already twigged. However, if a separate one has already been written, it would seem to me then the only one that needs to be changed is a recommendation for Sundays in Lavenham, using the same hours as Pin Mill. Or is that a separate matter we wish to discuss?
We're not here today to discuss Pin Mill. We're just looking at...
No, not Pin Mill. The Lavenham Sundays.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Lavenham proposals. Does that require a specific, a separate recommendation?
I think we decided a few minutes ago that we would put in a new recommendation 3.11.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Chair, actually, we're going to amend 3.8.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I thought it could be folded in. And Jan has absolutely predicted what I was going to say, I'm sure.
So if I could just read out, so if we amend 3.8 to that delegated authority beginning to the Director of Operations and Parking Services in consultation with the portfolio holder to make changes to the Council's off-street parking orders and put in place suitable resources to implement the recommendations, including any minor amendments resulting from any subsequent dialogue and agreements with Lavenham Council in this report in compliance with all statutory obligations in the law.
What's that lovely caption?
That sounds perfect. Right. Does anyone wish to raise any other matter before I go to the return to the issue of CIC? Because I think we still have a decision to be made around that in terms of how we address that going forward. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that it's something that would cause a delay to what we're doing here, but is that something that we believe in parallel? Because I'm not sure that to be honest, it's going to be something that will actually result in any decision to go ahead by any party in Sudbury or Hadley. But it's something we could explore just to make sure that it has been explored and we know where we are with regard to that. But it'd be something done in parallel to what we're doing now. Councillor McCraw and then Councillor Carter.
Can I make a suggestion, Chair, that on the subject of CIC, that in parallel with the decision on the paper before us, that we embark on a study, engagement, separate process, whilst we're not going to implement this immediately, that whilst in parallel with this, that we start a separate process to look at the potential for CIC, the potential implications of that, financial arrangements, the whole thing, whole shebang shaboodle. Let's see if anything comes of it. Okay, fine, accept that. But don't delay what we're doing. It would involve, by definition, a transfer of our facilities and our systems to said CIC. And I've already alluded to the fact that I think this would not be a simple process. As I say, some experience of dealing with CICs, they're not as simple organisations as people imagine. Councillor Saw has done some research on that as well. So, separate process, not even necessarily requiring a decision, but in parallel with the paper. I would suggest that as a compromised way of actually approaching that, rather than risking kicking this into the long grass.
I've got Councillor Carter and then Councillor Saw.
Thank you. Yes, I would very much like to see the possibility explored. It was explored before, and I think that after whatever outcome happens today, to give the towns and parishes the opportunity to get involved. As I said, I've spoken to the Chamber of Commerce, and they've said that they would be interested in it. So to say that it's not a viable option, I don't think it's particularly fair when there is already people, and possibly will be more people, who are willing to put it into practice. So yes, if it could be looked at, I think that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Of course, if during those investigations it was concluded that CIC would have to charge a tariff regime pretty much the same as ours, then there would be no benefit. Councillor Carter, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, please. But we don't know that until
no, we don't know
engage
that.
with
No,
them.
you're right.
You can
yes.
hypothesise all you like, but we need to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Understood. Councillor Saw.
I would support the idea of a separate study. As I have done a limited amount of research, and I admit it is limited, it does seem complex. However, I think it is advisable to explore it, particularly to discuss with potential groups who might want to run such a CIC and car parks, whether in Sudbury or Hadley, the full challenge of what they're trying to do. It isn't an easy thing to do, and as we all know, with community, with some community groups, people start with great enthusiasm, but lots of people leave in the convening the future years. So I think we should do it just for the purposes of being able to say to residents that we have looked at all available options.
Thank you. I believe the Chief Executive wants to say a few words on this subject.
Thank you, Chairman. If it's okay, I'll stay seated, as it were. So just a suggestion, if I may, councillors, which is just to widen this ever so slightly, because councillors who attended the town and parish liaison meetings towards the tail end of last year will recall that our towns and parishes, in Babergh in particular, were extremely keen to explore the notion of devolution and subsidiarity, not easy to say, but basically services being delivered at their lowest common denominator and therefore at the right level. And obviously we're midway through a consultation within Suffolk around devolution county deal, which is a similar debate about who does what and why. And so without wishing to complicate this, I would suggest that perhaps this is looked at in that wider context of who is most appropriate to deliver what services, and when is it appropriate to aggregate services because there's a benefit to doing so, and when is it more appropriate to disaggregate services because there's a benefit to doing so. And so I'm happy to take that away and us look in broader principles. So whilst that would include the conversation in relation to CIC, it wouldn't be restricted to that aspect.
Councillor Sally Davis, thank you.
What slightly worries me about this is that in the event that the CIC is a goer, that it might be put in practice, we might have wasted a lot of time and resources going down the route that we're saying now. Should we put a time limit on it? How can we minimise those implications?
Arthur.
That was in part my concern as well, which was to make sure that by looking at it in the round, then it won't have been a discrete piece of work that could potentially tie up a lot of time and energy to something that doesn't come forward. If by looking at it in a broader footprint, then that work needs to happen anyway. And so whilst this would be simply a smaller component of it, probably not the officers that you've got in the room today, probably more likely the communities team, but nonetheless in liaison with parking services around the CICA element.
Councillor Saw.
I would actually commend that approach because we recognise and have recognised that our financial position does require us to look at how we offer services now, how we partner with different groupings, whether they be elected or otherwise. And I think that that such a broader study would actually help us going forward as we look to try and bridge our budgetary deficit.
Thank you. Right. Does anybody wish to say anything more on the subject of this? So we're now drawing this debate to a close. Councillor Carter, do you want to have the last word?
Thank you. Yeah, so just to say there's a proposal on the table which we are voting on very soon. I would have liked to have seen a deferral for all the reasons that I have mentioned, but if I am reading the room correctly, that is not going to happen, and people are heading towards a certain way. So with the recommendations of overview and scrutiny, with suggestions from Councillor Dowling, and with also the views that we've had from our residents, from towns, from parishes, I would like to, I don't believe it's already been done, so I would like to propose an amendment that we retain 1 hour free parking. Please.
May I have a seconder for that? Councillor Potter. Sorry? Put it straight. Hands or electronic? Yeah. Put that straight to a vote by show of hands. All those in favour of that amendment? All those against? That amendment, unfortunately, Councillor Carter, is lost, but thank you for proposing it. We will now move to the vote on the recommendations that are in front of us now, with the amendment to recommendation 3.8 that has been tabled and written. Councillor McCraw, go on.
I think in the interest of transparency, I think given the nature of the debate, I think it's fair to call for an open vote. Is that reasonable?
The results of this vote will be on the website with the minutes.
Yes.
So
no, I don't mean the result. I mean the individual voting.
The individual voting will be on the website.
Oh, my apologies in that case.
That's for all electronic votes. The individual votes are posted, so you will see that. It'll be separate from the minutes, but it will be there alongside the minutes.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for and 2 against. That's carried.
Thank you. We've had a very long and thorough debate today, and I would like to thank everybody for their contributions, all the members of the Cabinet, all the other councillors present today, and particularly the officers for all the work they've put into this. It hasn't been an easy decision, and as you can see, it was a majority, not a unanimous vote, and we do need to take into account the concerns of those who are worried about the possible impacts of what we're doing. But we will keep a very close watch on this as it progresses. So that's the last item on today's agenda. The next meeting is Tuesday the 7th of May at 4 p.m. That will be the last meeting that I'll be in this chair, because after that will be Councillor Saw's responsibility. With that, I'd like to draw this meeting to a close. Thank you.